In this thrilling, action-packed story, secrets are exposed, lives are at stake, and justice will be served in the most unexpected way. Can the police chief keep his empire of lies intact? Or will one determined judge bring it all crashing down? Now, before we dive into the chaos and suspense, I want to hear from you. What would you do if you were in Langston's shoes, facing off against a corrupt police chief who's willing to destroy anyone to keep his secrets hidden? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends for more incredible stories like this one. Trust me, you don't want to miss the action ahead. Where in the world are you watching from? And what time is it on your clock right now? I'm curious to know who's tuning in from the farthest corners of the globe. Now, sit back, relax, and get ready for a wild ride through power, betrayal, and revenge. The story starts now. The thick Georgia heat pressed against the city of Clayton Ridge like a clenched fist. Inside the precinct office, Police Chief Dale Rourke, a man with a brick jaw and colder heart, stared down at a dossier that made his lips curl with disgust. Across the cover was a name that had begun surfacing far too often in his conversations: Judge Langston Miles. Judge Miles was everything Chief Rourke hated. Young, black, composed, and unapologetically powerful. He'd arrived in Clayton Ridge less than a year ago, but in that short time, he'd overturned multiple wrongful convictions, exposed corrupt practices, and dismissed officers accused of brutality, many of them handpicked by Rourke himself. The chief leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowed. "He thinks he can tear down everything I built," he growled. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Carver, stood by silently. His hesitation was thick in the air. "With all due respect, Chief, the man's clean. Background checks, military clearance, nothing sticks. He's even got the governor's ear." Rourke slammed his palm on the desk. "Everybody has a weakness. We just need to dig deep enough." He already had a plan in motion. A confidential informant had slipped him a whisper, a rumor that Judge Miles once had ties to an underground activist group from his youth. It was thin. But with the right setup, it could turn into something. Langston Miles walked through the courthouse halls with quiet authority. His presence alone brought silence to the rooms. With his tailored navy suit, smooth mahogany skin, and eyes that held both pain and power, he was the embodiment of controlled fury, shaped by a lifetime of injustice. His chambers were his sanctuary. That morning, he had just dismissed a drug case after exposing how officers had planted evidence. It wasn't the first time, and wouldn't be the last. As he reviewed court files, his assistant, a petite, sharp woman named Tasha, entered hurriedly. "Judge, you're gonna want to see this." She handed him a USB drive and a letter. Miles inserted the drive into his laptop and froze. It contained a series of grainy images of him, supposedly at a protest, standing beside a masked figure throwing a Molotov cocktail. The timestamp claimed it was from a riot in 2005. It was a fake, but it was a good fake. Tasha looked at him, stunned. "What the hell is this, Langston?" He stood slowly. "A declaration of war." Back at the precinct, Chief Rourke handed the doctored evidence to a local reporter named Hal Briggs, a smirking sleazeball desperate for a scoop. "You want to expose corruption?" Rourke said, smug. "This is your goldmine. Judge Miles isn't who he pretends to be." Hal studied the files with glittering eyes. "This'll explode, Chief. Just make sure the story breaks before Friday. He's ruling on my officer's misconduct charges that day." Friday came quickly. Protesters were already gathering outside the courthouse. The leaked footage had hit every news channel in the South by Wednesday evening. Although most of it was speculative, the visual narrative was damning. Miles hadn't commented yet. Inside the courtroom, the tension was a live wire. Officers sat in rows behind their defense attorney. Rourke sat in the front, arms crossed, his grin practically carved into his face. Judge Miles entered. Silence. He took his seat, and in a voice that sliced through the tension, he began, "Despite recent media attempts to discredit my integrity, this court will continue to function by the law, and nothing else." He motioned toward the defense table. "The evidence of these officers' misconduct is overwhelming, and the video footage submitted by independent journalists confirms that. This court finds officers Riley, Mendez, and Cook guilty of tampering with evidence, excessive force, and perjury. Sentencing will be issued next week." Gasps. Rourke stood up instantly. "This is outrageous. The judge is compromised." Court-martials approached, but Miles raised his hand. You will have your chance to appeal, Chief. But I suggest you find cleaner hands before you point fingers at mine. Rourke stormed out of the courthouse, red-faced. The press swarmed, but he shoved past them, his boots thudding against the concrete. He called Carver. Bring in our inside man. Tonight. We're going deeper. That night, under the foggy haze of downtown lights, Carver met Rourke in a parking lot behind a rundown jazz bar. A lanky, twitchy man named Shane was already waiting, face partially obscured by a hoodie. You sure this guy's reliable? Rourke asked. He's ex-military. Dishonorable discharge. Did a year for fraud. He's hungry. Shane stepped forward. You want Judge Miles taken out? Or just dirt on him? Rourke looked him dead in the eye. No hits. Not yet. But I want him discredited beyond redemption. Get into his past. Find something, anything. I don't care how deep you gotta go. Shane smirked. You got it. Give me 48 hours. By Sunday, things had escalated. Protesters flooded the city courthouse. Supporters of Judge Miles marched with signs reading "Justice for Miles and Corruption Runs Blue." On the other side, a smaller but loud group of Rourke's backers called for Miles' resignation. Someone threw a bottle. Sirens screamed. Fists flew. Tear gas was launched. From his office window, Miles watched the chaos unfold. Tasha entered. Langston. We found something. She placed a folder on his desk. Inside were surveillance photos, secret correspondences, and a suspicious transfer of funds from the city police budget to a private firm connected to Rourke. Langston's jaw tightened. So that's how he's funding this witch hunt. Tasha nodded. The deeper we dig, the darker it gets. This isn't just about you. It's systemic. Langston leaned forward, tapping the folder. Then we fight back. Not just for me. For everyone he's buried. At 3 a.m., Shane broke into a government records facility downtown. Using forged IDs and insider codes, he made his way into the classified archives section. His mission: find a sealed juvenile record linked to Miles. Rumor had it, Miles was once arrested in Chicago during his teen years for armed robbery. If true, it could destroy him, but the deeper he looked, the more strange things became. Files were missing. Access codes triggered alarms. The computer systems blocked certain entries with national security clearances. Shane's hands trembled. What the hell is this guy hiding? Before he could react, red lights flared. Motion sensors tripped. Security stormed in. Shane bolted, clutching a single printed document. It bore a single phrase at the top: classified, authorized personnel only, subject, Miles, Langston. Clearance, level 9. Racist police chief attempts to frame black judge, regret it when he learns who he really is. Rain hammered the rooftop of a decrepit motel on the city's edge as Shane stumbled into room 16, breathing hard, soaked to the bone, and shaking. His shoulder throbbed. He'd taken a hit from a security baton during his escape, but all he cared about was the single sheet of paper crumpled in his fist. The words danced through his mind: classified, authorized personnel only, subject, Miles, Langston. Clearance, level 9, it made no sense. Why would a judge, a local judge, at that, be tagged under national security clearance? Shane had worked black bag ops for years, and level 9 was reserved for top-tier federal intelligence assets. War operatives, or deep cover agents. Not a courtroom robe in Georgia. He reached for his burner phone and called Carver. I need to see the chief. Tonight. This guy's not who we think he is. Across town, Chief Rourke stood in his private study, sipping bourbon beneath a Confederate flag framed in polished glass. He'd just gotten off a phone call with a senator who owed him a favor. The heat's getting real, the senator warned. If Miles goes public with what he's found, you'll be radioactive. Rourke gritted his teeth. He won't live long enough to. Carver's call interrupted. Minutes later, the chief stood face to face with a drenched and visibly shaken Shane in a back room of the precinct. You're pale. Did you find something? Shane nodded, throwing the wet document onto the table. Rourke squinted at it. Level 9. Is this real? Shane swallowed hard. It's real. I tried to pull the file. It's locked tighter than Fort Knox. We're talking deep federal clearance. The system flagged me. Almost got caught. The chief's face drained of color. He reached for his phone. Who the hell is this guy? He muttered. Judge Miles sat alone in his study, a room lined with bookshelves and medals from his younger days. The press continued to run wild stories, some defending him, others dissecting every inch of his past. But none knew the truth. He had erased it for a reason. Tasha entered without knocking. Langston. We got word Shane made it into the federal building. Miles looked up, composed. Did he find it? Yes. But only a fragment. Langston stood and walked to a locked drawer in the corner. He opened it with a thumbprint and retrieved a black case. Inside was a single flash drive, unlabeled. I think it's time we stop playing defense. Chief Rourke met with two men in an abandoned train yard later that night. They weren't cops. They weren't even from Georgia. These men came from out of state, former contractors who now took cash for dirty work. You want him gone? One of them asked, lighting a cigarette. Rourke nodded. Make it look clean. No bullets. No blood. Just disappear him. The men exchanged glances. 50 grand. Half now. Rourke didn't blink. He handed over the duffel bag. You've got 72 hours. Monday morning, the courthouse buzzed with the tension of a powder keg. Miles was set to preside over a police union lawsuit, Rourke's last stronghold of political control. Tasha stopped him before he entered the courtroom. There's something else. A name came up in Shane's background, linked to a failed covert op in Libya. He was a CIA asset. Cut loose when things went bad. They say he flipped on his handlers. Miles's brow furrowed. So the chief is working with traitors now. Tasha nodded. They've gone too far this time. Inside the courtroom, Miles delivered his ruling. The police union's lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice. The evidence revealed massive embezzlement of pension funds, much of it traced back to Rourke's budget adjustments. The courtroom erupted. Miles stood firm, hammering the gavel. This court will not be manipulated by bullies or backroom power plays. That same afternoon, the two mercenaries followed Miles home, but Langston didn't go home that night. He went to a secure facility north of town, an old military installation restructured into a data center. The flash drive he carried contained footage, emails, and logs dating back over a decade. If made public, it would expose systemic corruption from police to state leadership. Inside the facility, he plugged in the drive and began the upload. Tasha watched the progress bar tick upward. You really ready to burn it all down? She asked. Langston exhaled. If I don't, who will? Meanwhile, Shane met secretly with Carver. This is bigger than both of us. Rourke has no idea what he's dealing with. You ever heard of Operation Wraith? Carver shook his head. Shane leaned in. Miles was part of a clandestine intelligence unit. Off the books. Deep state level. They don't just disappear threats, they rewrite history. Carver paled. So what do we do? We stopped digging. The mercenaries broke into Miles's house around midnight. Silent. Surgical. They found no alarms. No cameras, no one inside. Just one thing waiting for them on the kitchen counter, a file folder labeled for Dale Rourke. Inside, dozens of photos of Rourke's private meetings, audio transcripts of his phone calls, and a flash drive identical to the one Miles had uploaded. A note was attached. I see you. I'm watching. Keep digging, and I bury you. The next morning, Rourke's phone buzzed. It was the hitmen. He played us, one said. You're on your own. Rourke flung the phone across the room, veins bulging in his neck. Later that afternoon, a federal vehicle pulled up to the precinct. Two men in black suits walked in and requested access to internal police files under a sealed warrant. Rourke tried to block it. One of the agents flashed his badge. Federal investigation. Interference will result in immediate detainment. Panic flickered across the chief's face. He called his senator ally again, no answer, called his attorney, voicemail. By evening, 20 boxes of documents had been seized. Digital files scrubbed and stored on encrypted federal servers. Rourke sat in his office, sweating, alone. He picked up his pistol, staring at the barrel for a long time. A knock at the door pulled him out of it. Tasha stood outside, holding a file. "You don't know who you're messing with," she said coldly. Rourke's voice cracked. "Who is he?" She smirked. "You'll find out soon enough." Racist police chief attempts to frame black judge, regret it when he learns who he really is. The following morning, Judge Langston Miles walked calmly into the courthouse, escorted by 2 U.S. Marshals. Cameras swiveled toward him. Reporters shouted questions. He didn't flinch. He moved with the quiet confidence of a man who had weathered storms the public would never understand. Inside the building, District Attorney Karen Lyles waited in his chambers. Her arms were crossed, her mouth set in a tight line. "You drew blood, Langston. That ruling yesterday set fire to Rourke's inner circle. You're now public enemy number 1 to the state's most powerful man." Langston removed his coat, setting it on the chair with care. "I'm not afraid of fire. It always reveals who can withstand heat." Karen opened a thick manila folder and dropped it on his desk. "Then you better brace yourself for what's coming." Inside the folder were surveillance stills, grainy photos of Miles meeting with a known cartel enforcer nearly 12 years ago in Mexico. There were logs, receipts, and doctored travel records. A weak man might have buckled under the weight of such implication. But Miles's eyes didn't even twitch. He picked up one of the photos, held it up to the light. This was taken in Veracruz. 2013, during an undercover op. "I remember the smell of diesel and the heat pressing down like a blanket." Karen raised an eyebrow. "You're saying it's real, but taken out of context." He nodded. "They're building a fake story from a real thread. Someone's trying to construct a federal case around it." Karen closed the folder. "Then they're going big. They'll want to make this explosive. I have to warn you, Langston. If they indict you, they'll drag your name through the mud before you even get to court." Langston stared out the window, watching traffic crawl through Atlanta's downtown chaos. "Let them try." At police headquarters, Chief Rourke paced his office like a rabid animal. News of the federal raid spread like wildfire. Internal Affairs launched an emergency review. A dozen of his hand-picked officers had been placed on temporary leave. Some had already lawyered up. "You were supposed to shut him down." Rourke snarled at Shane, who stood on the other side of the desk, pale as death. "I didn't know who he was, Chief." "Nobody knew. He's buried deep." Rourke slammed his fist into the desk. "No more excuses. You want to stay out of prison, you do exactly what I say. I want Miles destroyed, his career, his past, his reputation. Everything. Find me leverage." Later that night, in an unmarked sedan parked on the edge of town, Shane met with a jittery contact, Luther Slick Graves, a former tech analyst turned freelance hacker. "You're late," Slick said, looking around nervously. "I'm risking prison even talking to you." Shane shot back. "You said you had something." Slick slid over a USB stick. "Found it buried in the back end of an old government contractor server. Miles worked under an alias, Xenon. Top-tier ghost op paper trails almost non-existent." Shane's eyes narrowed. "That all?" Slick hesitated. "There's more. Whispers from federal circles. They say Xenon was one of the few operatives allowed to write his own mission rules. Off-book, off-grid. If Miles is Xenon, you're not just poking a bear, you're kicking a damn lion." Shane took the drive and left without another word. By dawn, headlines blared across national media. Breaking: Atlanta judge under investigation for cartel ties. Talk shows exploded with speculation. Political analysts chewed on every photo, every travel log, every alleged connection. Back in the courthouse, Miles remained composed. Tasha placed the newspaper down on his desk. "They're going for character assassination," she said. Langston flipped through the pages, then set them aside. "Let them talk. I'm more interested in who leaked this." Tasha nodded. "Already working on it." The data was scrubbed from a former Pentagon subcontractor, named Trident Global. Langston's jaw tensed. Trident. Rourke's old security buddies. The game had escalated. That night, a black SUV tailed Langston's car through the winding back roads outside Fulton County. The driver was good, tight formations, no tail lights, maintaining just enough distance to remain invisible to the untrained eye. but Langston had spent years shaking tails in war zones. He took a sharp right into a service road, disappeared into the trees, and cut his engine. The SUV passed him. He stepped out from the shadows, Glock raised, and fired 2 precision shots into the rear tires. The SUV skidded to a stop. The occupant scrambled to react, but Langston was already at the driver's side, yanking the door open and dragging the man out. The passenger raised a pistol. Langston didn't hesitate. 1 shot to the arm, disarming him clean. The man screamed, writhing on the ground. Langston crouched next to him. "Tell Rourke, if he wants to come for me, he'd better bring more than cowards with guns." He vanished into the forest before sirens could arrive. Back in the city, Shane sat in a grimy motel, staring at the flash drive Slick had given him. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. He was terrified. He ran the program. A login screen popped up, encrypted, military grade. Suddenly, a message blinked across the screen, access attempt detected. "This activity has been logged." Shane cursed and yanked the plug. It was too late. Within seconds, a soft knock echoed at his motel door. He froze. Knock knock. He reached for his weapon and approached. The door burst open before he could react. 2 masked men stormed in, slammed him to the floor, and stuck a needle into his neck. Darkness swallowed him whole. When Shane awoke, he was strapped to a chair in a dimly lit room. A single man stood in front of him, tall, broad-shouldered, face hidden in shadow. "I warned you not to poke around," the man said calmly. Shane stammered, Who are you?" The man leaned forward. "Let's just say I used to clean up messes for people like Rourke. But now I clean up people like Rourke." Then, he slipped a flash drive into Shane's front pocket and unlocked his restraints. "When you wake up again, you'll remember nothing. But your conscience will." A fist landed hard on Shane's jaw. Blackout. The next day, Shane found himself lying in a hospital bed. His jaw ached, and a nurse said he'd been brought in after being found unconscious on the street. No ID. No memory, but in his jacket pocket, just like the man said, was the flash drive. Shane didn't know what was on it. But something deep inside told him, this was a warning, and a line had just been crossed that could never be uncrossed. Racist police chief attempts to frame black judge, regret it when he learns who he really is. Chief Rourke stood at the edge of his office window, arms folded behind his back, his face a cold mask of fury. The rain streaked down the glass like silent tears, but his mind wasn't on the weather. His plans were unraveling, thread by thread, and the man he tried to bury was rising like smoke, uncontainable, unpredictable. He turned toward the conference table where 4 of his top lieutenants stood stiffly, none daring to sit. "We planted the story. The cartel angle should have been enough to force a judicial review. Why isn't he off the bench?" Rourke growled. Lieutenant Vickers shifted uncomfortably. "Because Judge Miles isn't folding. He's not even flinching. Every hit we throw at him bounces back harder." Another officer, a grizzled veteran named Holloway, added, "There's something else, Chief. He's sending messages. Subtle ones. One of our unmarked vehicles was found abandoned, tires shot out, blood on the seat, but no bodies. No cameras. He's making moves off the grid." Rourke narrowed his eyes. "He's sending a message to me." He walked over to the screen and brought up surveillance images, Langston entering and exiting various federal buildings, talking with shadowy figures, shaking hands with people who didn't show up in government databases. "He's digging," Rourke said. "And if he finds the link to Project Patriot, we're all done." Holloway leaned forward. "You want us to clean it up?" Rourke stared at the screen for a long beat, then nodded slowly. "Burn it. All of it. Documents, servers, witnesses. Erase the past. Erase him if you have to." In a dark basement underneath the city's financial district, Langston Miles stood beside a dusty old man wearing Coke bottle glasses and a trench coat that hadn't been cleaned since Reagan's second term. "Langston. You got some damn nerve coming to me after 10 years, the man rasped. "You swore you'd never dig this back up." Langston removed a faded envelope from his inner coat pocket and placed it on the table. Inside were coordinates, names, a photograph of a desert base, and a list of personnel now dead or missing. "I need access to the Patriot archives," Langston said. The man's eyes widened. Project Patriot was never meant to see the light of day. It was blacker than black. You know that. Exactly why Rourke used it to build his empire. He took the op and turned it into his private enforcement army. "I helped shut it down." Now he's trying to resurrect it to destroy me. The old man lit a cigarette with shaky fingers. You want ghosts, Judge? Fine. But remember. Ghosts don't like being woken up. He opened a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards and handed Langston a small, leather-bound notebook, wrapped in plastic, coordinates, old ops sites, aliases, burner contacts. You'll need them. Langston took the book. I don't plan on surviving this clean. I just plan on surviving. Elsewhere in the city, Shane Donovan sat alone in his apartment, the lights off, the flash drive clutched in his hand. Ever since he woke up in the hospital, memories had been coming back in waves, violent, fractured images of a man in the shadows, threats whispered through clenched teeth, and a warning etched into his brain like acid, you're poking something bigger than the law. Shane plugged the drive into his laptop. A prompt appeared, enter keycode. He didn't have a key code, but instinctively. He typed in a date, May 12, 03, the day his father, also a cop, was killed in a mysterious training accident. The screen unlocked, inside were videos, grainy bodycam footage, suppressed depositions, kill lists. One document caught his breath, Rourke, Project Patriot, Atlanta Division Command Authorization. The files proved everything. Rourke had been the lead enforcer in an illegal domestic surveillance program, approved off the books by high-ranking defense contractors and then buried under a web of shell companies and political favors. Shane's hands shook. If this went public, it wouldn't just destroy Rourke, it would implicate half the state's law enforcement infrastructure. He picked up the phone and dialed a number he never thought he would. Tasha Ward, came the voice on the other end. Tasha. It's Donovan. I have something. Something Judge Miles needs to see. Something that'll blow this whole thing wide open. Tasha met Shane on the rooftop of a closed recreation center in East Point, her service pistol tucked just under her coat. You got some nerve calling me, she said, eyes narrowed. I didn't come to apologize. I came because I'm in over my head. He handed her the flash drive. This is the real reason they're after Miles. He's not just a judge. He's the last person alive who can testify against Rourke's Black Ops legacy. Tasha hesitated. And why help now? You were the one harassing him on Rourke's orders. Shane looked away. Because the people who tried to erase me. They didn't do it clean. And now I can't sleep. I think about the people who vanished. About the guy who gave me this drive and disappeared 2 hours later. She slid the drive into her coat. If you're lying, you'll wish you vanished. Back at the precinct, Chief Rourke was poring over phone records when Holloway burst into his office. We got a problem. Rourke's voice was a low growl. Define problem. Someone accessed the Patriot server files. Whoever it was knew the code. Now, the burner terminal's fried, and our internal trace points to a courthouse IP. Rourke slammed his fist into the wall, cracking the drywall. That damn judge. He turned to his lieutenants. If the feds come knocking again, we won't have time to wipe everything. Plan B, tonight. Holloway's eyes went wide. You mean? The safe house? Rourke nodded grimly. Take a team. Find the safe house Langston's using. I want it turned to ash. No witnesses. No survivors. At an undisclosed location, Langston sat alone at a metal table in a warehouse outfitted with silent generators, encrypted routers, and a war map of everything Rourke had touched, from campaign donations to black market weapons shipments. The notebook lay open in front of him. Red X's marked names. All but 2 were dead. A faint buzz alerted him to a new arrival. Tasha stepped in, soaked from the rain, and wordlessly handed over the flash drive. Langston plugged it into the laptop. His jaw tightened as the screen lit up with confirmation of every dark suspicion he'd had, and more. They buried entire divisions under this, Tasha said. The files are explosive. You release this, and it's not just Rourke who burns. You'll set fire to the whole city. Langston didn't blink. Then I hope they packed gasoline. Suddenly, the motion sensors around the perimeter flashed red. Tasha drew her gun. We've got company. Langston rose, slid the flash drive into a small titanium case. And clipped it to his belt. They found the safe house. Outside, black SUVs screeched to a halt. Armed men in tactical gear poured out. Langston turned to Tasha. No matter what happens, this drive makes it out. Even if we don't. She nodded. Let's give them a war. Racist police chief attempts to frame black judge, regret it when he learns who he really is. The night air was thick with tension. Rain hammered the roof of the warehouse like a warning drumbeat. Langston and Tasha stood back to back inside the steel-walled compound, both armed and ready, as shadows moved outside like silent predators. Infrared lasers flickered across the room. Snipers were in position. Rourke hadn't sent officers, he'd sent executioners. They're not here to arrest us, Tasha muttered, scanning for angles. This is a kill team. Langston crouched behind a stack of reinforced crates and checked the mag in his pistol. Then we make damn sure they earn it. The first flashbang exploded through a window. Blinding white light bursting inside. Instinct took over. Langston rolled behind a pillar while Tasha fired 2 quick shots, dropping the first man through the door. Another followed, only to catch a round to the throat. The warehouse erupted into chaos. Langston sprinted to a control box and smashed the breaker. The lights died instantly, plunging everything into darkness. Night vision goggles clicked on outside, but Langston knew this place better than they did. It wasn't just a safe house, it was a war room. Built for siege. He yanked a hidden switch behind the crate, activating a line of metal shutters that dropped behind interior doorways, turning the building into a death maze. Tasha ducked behind cover, firing as she moved. If we're making a last stand, I want to know what's at stake. Langston tossed her a USB clone drive. Every dirty secret Rourke's tried to bury for 20 years. Names, bodies, locations. You get that to the press, the Justice Department, or someone who won't be bought, we win. Tasha caught the drive, eyes steely. Then I don't miss. Outside, Chief Rourke sat in the back of a black SUV parked half a block away, watching through a live drone feed. The warehouse was lit up like a war zone. Status. He barked into the radio, this isn't going as smooth as planned. Holloway's voice crackled through the comms. Judge Miles turned the place into a fortress. We've lost 4 already. Rourke's jaw clenched. Burn it down if you have to. I want that man erased. Inside, Langston moved like a ghost, slipping through dark corridors, picking off intruders with precise, surgical strikes. He wasn't just a judge. He was something else, something none of them could have predicted. Tasha dropped into the ventilation shaft above the hallway and crawled forward. Below, 2 enforcers moved silently toward Langston's last known location. She slid her suppressed pistol from her belt, lined up the shot, and fired twice. Both men dropped without a sound. She whispered into her earpiece. They're trying to flank you. I've got the north hallway. Copy that. Langston replied. Seal the exit doors once I reach the server vault. Tasha tapped a remote detonator and watched as steel barriers clamped shut on all exterior doors. The kill team was now trapped inside with them. The ground trembled with an explosion as one of the outer walls buckled inward. Smoke billowed. A brute in full armor stomped through the gap, carrying a rotary shotgun. He roared a command in Spanish and fired wildly. Langston dived behind a metal cabinet as buckshot tore through the air, slamming into steel. He reached into his coat, pulled a flashbang, and hurled it around the corner. The blast stunned the enforcer. Langston charged out, tackled the man to the floor, and wrenched the weapon from his hands. A quick jab to the throat, followed by a dislocation of the arm, and the attacker was down. Langston looked at the weapon, grim. Rourke didn't just send killers, he sent ghosts from the past. Meanwhile, Donovan sat in his car 5 miles away, tapping into emergency comms. His police access had been revoked, but he still knew backdoors. He intercepted a coded transmission labeled Phoenix Protocol, the same name he'd seen on the flash drive. He picked up his phone and called the only man who would still answer. Captain Reyes, Donovan said, they're hitting Miles right now, full-on assassination op. If you still care about the badge, now's the time to show it. Reyes was quiet for a long moment. Give me a location. Donovan rattled off coordinates. And bring real backup. Not the badge sellouts. We need men and women who remember what justice means. Reyes exhaled. I'll call in a favor. Hold on. Back at the warehouse, Langston reached the vault room. Inside, servers hummed quietly, old, but still operational. He accessed the central console, inserting the drive Tasha had given him. A prompt appeared, decrypt files. he entered a string of commands, and slowly, images, audio clips, and documents began to appear on screen. Photos of secret prisons, audio recordings of illegal orders, classified surveillance footage of civilian targets. Langston copied everything to a second drive. Tasha's voice crackled through comms. They're regrouping. I hear at least 6 moving in formation down the east side. Langston closed the console. Time to vanish. He yanked open a floor hatch, revealing a sewage tunnel that led half a mile outside the city grid. Tasha dropped in beside him. They sealed the hatch behind them just as the warehouse detonated. In the blast's aftermath, Holloway stumbled out of the rubble, coughing blood. A soldier helped him into a vehicle. They looked around, but there were no bodies, only fire. Chief Rourke stared at the carnage from his SUV, rage bubbling beneath the surface. His plan had failed. Again, but worse than failure was uncertainty. They're still out there, he whispered. And now they have the files. 3 hours later, in a hidden underground room beneath an old Masonic lodge, Langston watched as the copied files uploaded to a secure drop server. Dozens of emails, cloud keys, and deep web links blinked green. He turned to Tasha. When those files go live, the whole country will see the truth. Tasha nodded. Let's hope someone cares. Langston looked at the photo of Rourke in the file, 20 years younger, dressed in military black, standing beside a line of bodies. I don't care if they do, Langston said coldly. I'm not doing this for them. I'm doing it because no one else can. Tasha placed a hand on his shoulder. What next? Langston checked his weapon and looked at the map pinned to the wall. Now we go to war. Racist police chief attempts to frame black judge, regret it when he learns who he really is. The hush before dawn blanketed the city in a deceptive calm, but under the surface, a storm brewed. Langston and Tasha had made it out of the warehouse by seconds, and now, deep beneath the city streets in an old Prohibition-era tunnel, they were on the move again, driven not just by survival, but vengeance, precision, and purpose. They had the files. They had the truth. But they also had enemies in every direction, and Rourke wasn't going down quietly. Tasha adjusted her headset, breath fogging in the cold tunnel air. This city's crawling with Rourke's people. We can't trust anyone. Langston kept his pace steady. We don't need trust. We need proof. And we've got it now. But he controls the courts, the media, even parts of the DOJ, she said. You really think one flash drive is going to be enough? Langston stopped and turned to her. Not one. 100. He reached into his satchel and pulled out a small, weathered black box. Inside, nestled among foam, were 6 microdrives, duplicates of the full Phoenix Protocol dump. I've got people in DC, Atlanta, even London, he said. Each one gets a copy. And once they open it, the whole web starts to unravel. Tasha smirked. You really were 10 steps ahead, weren't you? Langston didn't smile. I've spent years building this moment. Chief Rourke, on the other hand, was unraveling. He slammed his fist into the touchscreen of his office wall, watching security footage of the failed raid. His men were either dead, missing, or humiliated. The warehouse was destroyed. Langston was alive, and worse, now armed with every piece of classified evidence he wasn't supposed to find. He turned toward Holloway, who stood beside him with bandages around his torso. You told me he was just a judge, Rourke snarled. You didn't tell me he was military trained, off-grid capable, and packing an arsenal. I didn't know, Holloway hissed, wincing. He's not in any of the usual databases. He's off-book. Then we find someone who can track him. Rourke snapped. He picked up a secure line and made a call. A cold voice answered. This is Echo. I need a ghost hunter, Rourke growled. I need Langston Miles neutralized before sunrise. There was silence. Then, you'll need to double the fee. Rourke didn't hesitate. Done. Langston and Tasha surfaced through a hatch near a subway terminal in the south side of the city. They slipped into the shadows, blending with the early morning rush. Langston pulled up his hood, spotting security drones buzzing overhead. We need to disappear, Tasha whispered. Langston nodded and led her to a boarded-up storefront. Inside was a fake barbershop front that gave way to a hidden safe house, a place he hadn't used in 7 years. Inside, an old associate was waiting, Luis Morales, a former NSA cryptographer who now freelanced in deep web anonymity. Luis grinned as they walked in. Damn, I thought you were dead. Langston shut the door behind them. Not yet. But I've got something you need to see. He dropped one of the microdrives on the table. Luis plugged it into a laptop protected by layers of encryption. As the files spilled across the screen, Luis' expression darkened. This is next level, man. Rendition programs. Surveillance of civil rights leaders. Assassination orders with no judicial oversight. And all tied to Rourke, Langston said. Luis looked at him. If this leaks, it won't just burn the city. It'll scorch half the country. Langston leaned in. Good. Light the match. At that moment, a black SUV rolled to a quiet stop 3 blocks away. A man in a dark trench coat stepped out, tall, lean, with eyes that looked like they hadn't blinked in years. Echo, he scanned the storefronts, eyes locking on the faded barbershop. He spoke into a mic clipped to his collar. Target located. Hold position. I'm going in quiet. He moved like vapor, no sound, no hesitation. Echo had done this kind of work in Yemen, in Venezuela, in countries that didn't appear on maps. Langston Miles was just another file to close. Inside, Luis was uploading a fraction of the files to 3 servers on the dark net when the power flickered. Langston's instincts flared. Kill the feed, he barked. Luis froze. What? Now. Tasha flipped the lights off as Langston pulled his pistol. A second later, a suppressed bullet slammed into the wall where Luis had been sitting. Echo was already in the room. Langston grabbed a steel chair and flung it across the room. It collided with Echo mid-stride, knocking the silencer off his gun. Tasha dove behind cover and opened fire. Echo rolled, fired twice, hitting the wall beside her. Langston lunged forward, tackling Echo. They slammed into the table, toppling it. Fists flew, fast, brutal. Langston landed a blow to Echo's ribs, but Echo responded with a headbutt that sent Langston reeling. You should have stayed in the courthouse, Echo hissed. Langston spat blood. I did. But you people kept kicking in the door. They grappled again. Langston twisted Echo's wrist, snapping it backward, forcing him to drop the pistol. Tasha grabbed the weapon and shot twice, hitting Echo in the leg. Echo hit the ground with a thud, breathing hard. Langston stepped over him. Who sent you? You already know, Echo gasped. Langston looked to Luis. Torch the drive. Move base. Luis hesitated, then nodded. I'll take the mobile unit and scatter the IPs. They won't trace this. Langston grabbed Echo's collar and pulled him close. Tell Rourke the next time he sends ghosts, I'll send hell back. They left Echo bleeding and unconscious, and within minutes, the safe house was nothing but smoke and scorched walls. Back at HQ, Rourke watched through body cam footage as Echo bled out on the floor. Damn it, he muttered, but then Holloway burst in. We just got a hit. Langston's face popped up on a traffic cam 2 miles from City Hall. And guess what else? What? He's heading toward the courthouse. Rourke stood, eyes narrowing. He's not running anymore. Holloway swallowed. No, sir. He's going public. Rourke grabbed his badge and gun. Then we make sure he never gets the chance. 30 minutes later, Langston and Tasha stood in front of the courthouse steps. It was almost poetic. This was the building where justice had been twisted and abused by the likes of Rourke for decades. But today, it was going to be different. Langston looked up. Time to turn the tide. Tasha smiled grimly. Let's give them something they can't ignore. They walked up the steps side by side, toward destiny, toward war, toward the reckoning. By the time Langston and Tasha stepped inside the courthouse, the atmosphere had shifted. Marble floors echoed with tension. Court officials exchanged confused looks, unaware that something explosive was about to erupt inside their pristine, sanitized walls. Langston wore a black suit, clean-cut, pressed, and deadly. But it wasn't his appearance that sent tremors through the system, it was the fire in his eyes. He wasn't here to plead. He wasn't here to protest. He was here to conquer. Tasha held the last encrypted drive in her hand. The others had been dispersed, uploaded to off-grid cloud servers protected by international encryption. This one, though, this one was special. This one was going public. Live, they stepped into courtroom 3, the same room Rourke had dragged Langston into at the beginning of this nightmare. Cameras weren't allowed in most federal courtrooms, but Langston had made some calls. His friends and international press had been given access. The room was already packed with journalists, civil rights lawyers, law students, and judges. He walked straight to the bench. Judge Langston Miles, a court clerk, stammered. "What are you?" He raised his hand. "I'm reclaiming my courtroom." Then, with steel in his voice, he declared, "I am calling an emergency hearing, open to the public and the press, under Article 4, Section 32 of the Federal Judicial Code. Anyone obstructing this will be held in contempt." A hushed silence fell over the room. Lawyers froze. The bailiff, visibly shaken, stepped back. Langston had authority, real authority, and they knew it. Tasha connected the drive to a secure laptop wired to the courtroom monitors. As the images and files lit up the giant screen, operation names, assassination orders, black site transfers, gasps rippled across the room. Then the doors burst open. Chief Rourke stormed in, flanked by 24 armed officers. His face was red with rage, his hands itching toward his holster. He looked like a man who had just watched his empire teeter on the edge of collapse. "Shut it down," he barked. "Arrest him. That's an imposter, he's impersonating a federal judge," and Langston's voice sliced through the room like a blade. "Stand down." Everyone froze. Langston reached into his coat and pulled out an ID card with gold trim. He held it up for everyone to see. The press cameras zoomed in. The badge wasn't from the state courts. It wasn't from the DOJ. It was from something far above them. It read, "United States Special Judicial Command, Level Alpha Clearance, Operative, Langston R. Miles, Jurisdiction, Federal Oversight of Corrupt Domestic Institutions, Rank, Chief Adjudicator, appointed by Joint Presidential Directive 292-B, Rourke staggered. He stammered. "You're not just a judge." Langston stepped down from the bench. "I'm not just a judge," he said. "I was appointed by a joint commission of the FBI, CIA, and Homeland Security to root out the cancer inside law enforcement and judiciary branches. I've been undercover for 5 years. Every corrupt official, every secret execution, every racially motivated arrest, you were the final target, Rourke." The room exploded with gasps and shouting. Reporters scrambled over each other to record every second. Officers began backing away from Rourke. Even his most loyal men looked pale. Rourke reached for his weapon, but the moment his hand touched the grip, a voice boomed from behind the doors. "Put it down, Rourke." It was Director Elena Hayes, head of the Federal Internal Security Division, flanked by heavily armored federal agents in black and blue gear. Rourke turned, sweat pouring from his face. "This is a setup. That man, he's lying." Elena raised her weapon. "Your access has been revoked. Your badge is invalid. You've been indicted on 47 federal charges. We have footage, documentation, witness testimony, and a full recording of your attempted assassination order on Judge Miles. I did what had to be done." Rourke bellowed, suddenly trembling. "This country needs order. I cleaned up the streets, I kept the filth out." He didn't get to finish. Langston moved like lightning. In one motion, he flipped Rourke's gun from his hand and delivered a punishing elbow to his ribs. Rourke hit the marble floor with a grunt, groaning in pain. 2 federal agents cuffed him and hauled him upright. Langston stood over him. "Order isn't built on oppression. And justice isn't a tool for you to manipulate." Rourke's eyes were wide with panic. "You don't understand. You don't know who I answer to." Langston leaned close. "Oh, I know exactly who's next." Tasha stepped forward and handed a list to Director Hayes. More names, high up, hidden in plain sight. Langston turned to the press. "What you've seen today is only the beginning. There are more like Rourke, hiding behind uniforms, badges, robes. But they're about to learn. There are those of us who still serve the real Constitution. Not the corrupted version they twist to control people." The room erupted into cheers. Outside, the world watched. Within the hour, Langston's courtroom broadcast had gone viral. Millions of Americans were glued to their screens. By nightfall, the Department of Justice had ordered emergency investigations in 4 states. The Phoenix Protocol files were being dissected by journalists, lawyers, and citizens around the globe, and Chief Rourke? He was thrown into solitary confinement in a federal black site, under investigation not just for corruption, but for treason. Langston stood on the courthouse steps that evening. Breathing in the cool air, Tasha joined him, her eyes reflecting the swirling camera lights. "What now?" she asked. Langston turned toward the city. "Now," he said, "we clean house." Racist police chief attempts to frame black judge, regret it when he learns who he really is. Rourke's arrest sent shockwaves through the country, but for Langston, it was just the beginning of a much deeper war. Within 24 hours, 23 more officers across the state were suspended. 5 resigned without comment. 2 high-ranking federal prosecutors mysteriously vanished. A chain reaction had been triggered, and Langston knew the retaliation wouldn't just be legal or political, it would be violent. The next morning, Langston sat across from Director Elena Hayes inside a black van disguised as a City Works vehicle. They were parked at a covert site in the woods outside of D.C. A neutral zone known as Echo Hollow, a meeting ground for high-clearance agents. Elena's tone was clipped. "The people you exposed were just the surface. Intelligence confirms a shadow network is active across 10 cities, composed of rogue law enforcement, ex-military, and private contractors. They're calling themselves the Legion of Order. You've poked the nest." Langston nodded, eyes locked on a screen showing encrypted messages and satellite captures. "Then it's time to smoke them out." Hayes hesitated. "They've already started moving. Last night, an informant we flipped turned up dead. Tortured. That was a message to you." Langston leaned back. "Message received." That night, Langston didn't go home. He knew his brownstone was compromised. Instead, he moved through a network of safe houses used during his years in deep cover. In one of them, a basement in southeast D.C., he reconnected with Jax Monroe, a former Special Forces teammate turned cyber operative. Jax was a big man, with a cybernetic left arm and a nasty sense of humor. So the mighty judge finally got his hands dirty, he grinned, typing on a rigged military-grade laptop. "About time." Langston cracked a smile. "I need every known asset tied to the Legion. Names, phone taps, off-the-books facilities. We're going on offense." Jax pulled up a map full of red marks. "These guys don't just sit in precincts. They've got funding from private donors, think tanks, politicians. Real sickos. You sure you want to take them head on?" "I don't want to," Langston said flatly. "I have to." Just as he spoke, an alert flashed on Jax's screen. "Perimeter breach." The basement lights dimmed. The air felt charged. Jax's voice turned serious. "Motion sensors on the rear stairwell. They found us." Before Langston could respond, gunfire ripped through the basement steel entrance. "Go." Jax barked, tossing Langston a suppressed Glock 45. The judge caught it mid-air and rolled toward the back hallway. 2 masked figures entered the room with military precision, night vision goggles, silencers, no insignia. Langston dropped the first with a 2-shot burst to the chest. The second ducked behind a pillar and returned fire, clipping Langston in the arm. Blood sprayed, but he didn't stop. He charged forward, sliding under the second man's cover, and slammed him into a wall. The intruder reached for a combat knife, but Langston twisted his wrist and disarmed him in one brutal move. A quick elbow to the throat ended it. Langston turned to Jax, who was bleeding from the shoulder but still typing furiously. "Shut it down. Burn the servers." Jax nodded. "Done. But before I do, check this." He pointed at the screen, a digital ledger of transactions linked to an elite Washington law firm. And behind that firm, a name Langston hadn't heard in a decade, Judge Quinton Vale. Langston's expression darkened. "I thought he retired." Jax shook his head. "No. He's been running part of the Legion from the shadows. He trained Rourke. In fact, we think he orchestrated your entire takedown. He knew your identity before Rourke ever did." Langston's jaw clenched. He'd once considered Vale a mentor, back when he first joined the Judicial Academy. He was the one who had opened doors for Langston, only to later block them behind his back. "This goes all the way to the top," Langston murmured. Jax pressed a burner phone into his hand. "There's a contact inside Vale's operation. She's deep undercover. Codename, Sparrow. She's the only one who can get you in." Langston took the phone, then looked around the now dark, blood-streaked basement. "They're not waiting anymore. They want a war." Jax grinned, despite the pain. "Then let's give them hell." 2 days later, Langston stood outside a private gala in Northern Virginia, dressed in a sharp tuxedo, earpiece tucked discreetly in his left ear. Inside, political elites mingled with police commissioners and high-level judges. Sparrow's voice came through the line. "You've got 5 minutes before security cycles. Third floor. West wing. Private study. That's where Vale's hard drives are." Langston moved quickly, bypassing the ballroom and slipping into the back hall. He took out a guard with a precise nerve strike and moved silently up the stairs. He reached the study, picked the lock, and stepped inside. Old wood panels. Bookshelves. A desk that probably cost more than most homes. He moved to the computer tower. Plugged in a data siphon. The drive spun. Suddenly, a voice behind him: "You always did like shortcuts." Langston turned slowly. Judge Quinton Vale stood at the doorway, aged but sharp, a silver pistol in hand. "You think exposing Rourke wins you the war?" Vale chuckled. "That idiot was a pawn. I built this world. And you were supposed to be part of it." Langston didn't flinch. "You taught me justice. And then you betrayed it." Vale's eyes narrowed. "Justice isn't blind. It's obedient. And you refused to bow." Without hesitation, Vale fired. Langston rolled, the bullet grazing his leg. He dove behind the desk and returned fire. Wood splintered. Books exploded. Sparrow's voice crackled. "Extraction team en route, hold position." Langston grabbed a paperweight and hurled it across the room, shattering a lamp and plunging them into semi-darkness. He lunged forward and slammed into Vale, disarming him. They struggled, years of tension exploding into fists and fury. Finally, Langston pinned Vale to the wall. "You wanted me erased?" he snarled. "Now watch me erase you." He slammed the encrypted drive into his coat, handcuffed Vale with federal-issued cuffs, and dragged him to the window, where a black chopper hovered with lights piercing the sky. As the chopper lifted off, Langston stared down at the mansion growing smaller beneath them. He clutched the drive, packed with evidence that would ignite a storm across the nation, but it wasn't over, not yet, because deep in the shadows, the real mastermind hadn't shown their face. And Langston knew this was only round 2. Racist police chief attempts to frame black judge, regret it when he learns who he really is. The encrypted drive Langston extracted from Judge Vale's private study was more than just a digital archive, it was a warhead. Contained within its coded layers were confidential communications, black site locations, fund transfers, names of agents both foreign and domestic, and perhaps most disturbingly, classified dossiers on sitting federal judges who were either blackmailed or compromised. Inside a dark ops intelligence vault beneath Arlington, Langston stood beside Director Elena Hayes and a small team of counterintelligence analysts, watching as the drive unpacked line after line of damning information. "Jesus," one analyst muttered, scrolling through the feed. "This isn't just corruption. It's a full-blown domestic shadow regime." Hayes crossed her arms. "They've been embedded for over a decade. Some of these judges have been ruling on federal cases while being puppeteered by this network." Langston stared at one particular name on the screen, Justice Malcolm Brigson, a man who had once voted against Langston's promotion to the Court of Appeals. "They had leverage on all of them," he muttered. "Threats. Bribes. Kidnappings. Even family surveillance." Hayes looked up. "We just became the most dangerous people in the country. You sure you're ready for what comes next?" Langston didn't blink. "I'm already in the fire. Let's walk through it." Suddenly, the screen went dark. The entire control room flickered. Backup generators kicked in, a junior agent shouted, "Signal jamming initiated. External breach, North Corridor." Langston grabbed his weapon. "Seal the exits. Lock down the drive." But it was already too late. A thunderous explosion rocked the compound. The ceiling above the eastern wing collapsed, sending concrete and steel crashing down. A group of masked, armored assailants stormed in, executing a precision raid with military efficiency. These weren't local thugs, they were Tier 1 operators, rogue, but elite. Langston dove behind a server rack as gunfire erupted. 2 analysts were hit instantly. Elena Hayes pulled a sidearm from her ankle holster and returned fire, taking down one intruder before catching a round in her side. Langston bolted toward her, dragging her into a security alcove. "You okay?" he shouted over the chaos. She gritted her teeth. "Just clipped. But they're not here for us." They're here for the drive. Langston shoved a smoke grenade into her hand. On my signal, throw this. We're not letting that data leave this room. Across the room, one of the invaders pulled out a device, an electromagnetic extractor. He placed it on the encrypted server, initiating a rapid data sweep. Now. Langston yelled. Elena hurled the grenade. Smoke engulfed the room in seconds. Langston surged forward through the haze, using his memory of the room's layout to reach the extractor. In a blur of motion, he tackled the operator, disarming him, then crushed the extractor under his boot. The invader reached for a pistol, but Langston shot him in the shoulder, spun him around, and used him as a shield to advance on the others. By the time the smoke cleared, 4 assailants were down, but 2 had escaped. With one of the drive's portable data keys, Langston cursed. They got a fragment. Hayes pressed her bloody hand against the wall. Then we trace it. If they want to use that piece, they'll need to decrypt it through known shadow networks. We flood those channels with false trails. Langston helped her up. We're not playing defense anymore. We're taking this war to them. That night, back in a bunker beneath the old Capitol ruins, an abandoned site from Cold War contingency plans, Langston met again with Sparrow, the deep cover informant. She was in her early 30s, quick-eyed, with a calm sharpness that never left her. The men who raided the vault are XSOG. Special Operations Group. Their current leader isn't Vale. Not anymore. Langston folded his arms. Who is it? Sparrow looked him dead in the eye. It's Rourke's older brother, Colonel Dean Rourke. Retired Force Recon. CIA spook. Off the books for the last 6 years. He's gone full radical. The Legion follows him now. Langston's jaw clenched. How many are under his command? Hard to say, she replied. But they're planning a decisive strike. Not just politically. Physically. Word is, they want to assassinate every federal judge they can't control. It starts in 48 hours. Langston felt a chill crawl down his spine, and then Sparrow dropped the final bombshell, your target number 1. 2 hours later, Langston stood on a rooftop in northeast D.C., watching the Capitol dome in the distance. The rain came down steady, washing blood and ash from his jacket. His comms buzzed, Jax's voice came through. Tracked the stolen data key. Signal bounce led us to an encrypted server just activated in Michigan. Abandoned National Guard facility, retrofitted with military-grade defense. That's your next stop. Langston exhaled, eyes narrowed. Send coordinates. Get the plane ready. By dawn, Langston was aboard a stealth transport jet, heading toward Camp Redwood, a decommissioned base now in the Legion's grip. With him were 6 Black Ops operatives loyal to the Constitution, not their commanders. Among them, Jax, Sparrow, and Captain Leora Nash, a tactical expert with a record of dismantling insurgent cells across the Middle East. As they prepped their gear, Nash gave Langston a hard look. You're a judge, not a general. Langston loaded a clip into his sidearm. I've been both. You'll see. At exactly 0600 hours, their team parachuted in under cloud cover. Langston landed hard, rolled, and came up with his weapon drawn. In the distance, the base's power grid buzzed under high voltage. Snipers were visible on the northern watchtower. They moved silently, eliminating patrols one by one, disabling comms, jamming their signals. Then, just as they reached the server bunker, the sky erupted with gunfire. They were spotted. Move. Langston shouted, diving into the fray. Bullets screamed. Grenades detonated. The air was filled with smoke, metal, and screams. Langston fought like a man possessed. His movements sharp, efficient, deadly. They reached the inner chamber. Inside was Colonel Dean Rourke, tall, broad, and brutal-looking. He smiled when he saw Langston. So you're the ghost my little brother couldn't kill, he sneered. Langston raised his weapon. You and your Legion are done. Rourke laughed. We haven't even begun. Without warning, a kill switch was hit. The room began to self-destruct, servers melting, circuits frying. Langston tackled Rourke, fists flying, steel met bone in a vicious brawl. They crashed through a glass panel, fell onto the lower level. Sparks rained around them. Langston pinned Rourke, drew a combat knife, and then a sudden shot rang out. Langston fell sideways, blood streaming from his ribs. Sparrow had entered just in time, and fired. Rourke lay still, wounded but alive, Langston gasped. Secure him. He's our link to the final piece. Sparrow nodded. We've got him. But Langston knew. Someone else was still pulling the strings. The storm was far from over. Colonel Dean Rourke had been taken alive, barely. With his leg shattered and 2 bullets in his abdomen, he drifted in and out of consciousness as Langston and his elite team dragged him from the burning remains of the data facility. The destruction was total, servers melted, hard drives reduced to slag. But Langston didn't need the files anymore. He needed the man. Rourke was the vault now. As they evacuated under gunfire, Nash secured the rear with 2 agents, holding off the last remnants of the Legion cell as a VTOL exfiltration drone descended through the smoke. Langston shouted over the roar of gunfire, "We take him back to the capital. Chain of evidence matters now. We do this right." Nash smirked. "You think the law still works after what we've seen?" Langston stared at her, blood still soaking through his combat vest. "No. But truth does. And truth doesn't need permission." They loaded into the VTOL and lifted off just as the entire base erupted into a final blast, collapsing the last stronghold of the domestic insurgency. But Langston knew this wasn't over, because in his hand, clutched tight, was a small chip, ripped from Rourke's vest. Not a bomb trigger. Not a comms node. It was a bio key, and the last line of data that had scrolled across the bunker screen before the meltdown was a name: Judge Solomon Vale, back in D.C., with the capital in virtual lockdown. Langston returned to his courthouse, damaged, dark, but still standing. The halls were quiet, echoing the storm outside. Only select guards remained, loyal to him, stationed under covert orders. Everyone else had fled or been compromised. Inside his office, Sparrow and Jax laid Rourke on a makeshift cot and began an adrenaline push to stabilize him. Langston turned to Nash. "You said earlier that Vale wasn't the head. That someone else pulled the strings. I need to know who." Nash nodded and pulled out a tablet, loading decrypted fragments from surviving data traces. This was buried deep. A whisper protocol only accessible by biometric key, which you now have. It's old, very old. Goes back at least 15 years. Langston narrowed his eyes as the screen lit up. An image appeared. Fuzzy at first. Then it sharpened. It wasn't Vale. It wasn't Rourke, it was Chief Calvin Huxley, the same man who tried to frame Langston. The same man who'd abused his badge and threatened witnesses. A man who had once called Langston just another affirmative action judge to his face. Langston's blood boiled. "He's the architect?" Nash nodded grimly. "Everything ties back to him. Court manipulation, weaponized law enforcement, black site rendition squads, media control, it all links to his command when he was in Homeland 10 years ago. Then he retired into policing." Langston clenched his fists. He didn't retire. He strategically embedded himself. Right under our noses. Sparrow stepped in. "He's made his next move. We intercepted chatter, he's holding a press conference tomorrow. They're flipping the narrative. Blaming you for orchestrating an armed insurrection. They've already forged surveillance footage, edited your voice into intercepted calls." Jax slammed his fist on the desk. "It's a setup. If that broadcast airs, you're finished in the public eye. Law won't matter. They'll storm this building and take you dead or alive." Langston exhaled slowly, his mind racing through every legal, tactical, and political angle. Then we do what they never expected. The next day, as dawn broke over Washington, Langston put on his judicial robes, not the bloodied ones, but a pristine set retrieved from a hidden locker beneath the chambers. He stared in the mirror. Gone was the calm, polished jurist. In his eyes burned war, history, and purpose. Across the city, Chief Huxley stood before a wall of cameras. Flags flapped in the breeze behind him. His face was solemn, but smug beneath the mask. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "I regret to inform you that Judge Langston Briggs has betrayed the values of this nation. He has been implicated in treasonous activity." Suddenly, the screen behind him blinked. Static buzzed, the feed changed. The footage now showed Rourke, live and bleeding, strapped to a gurney. Jax's voice came over the feed. "This is a live confession. Verified, authenticated, and time-stamped. The truth can no longer be silenced." Gasps erupted. Rourke coughed blood, but his voice was clear. the Legion wasn't born in a cave. It started in a boardroom. Chief Calvin Huxley gave us orders. Funded us. Protected us. He wanted control over the judiciary. Over elections. Over truth. And Judge Langston Briggs was the one man he couldn't buy, scare, or frame. Huxley's face turned pale. Reporters swarmed him. Langston watched the chaos from a secure comms room. Hit him again, he said. The screen now showed files, original communications. Voice logs, unedited footage of the frame job, evidence of the planted drugs and cash. It was a death blow to Huxley's entire operation, but Langston wasn't done. He stepped into the rotunda of the courthouse. Cameras caught him as he walked calmly up the marble stairs, flanked by Sparrow, Jax, and Nash. He held a folder in his hand. Inside, signed confessions, warrants, a constitutional brief invoking emergency authority for the removal of a sitting police chief under the Insurrection Prevention Act. Langston stood before the podium. Some of you know me only as a judge. Others see the color of my skin and assume I must be angry, militant, dangerous. But today, you will see me for what I truly am. He opened the folder and let the papers flutter into the wind. I am a man who believes in justice. I am a man who has worn the uniform, sworn the oath, and lived in the shadow of those who would tear this nation apart from the inside. Today, the lies end. The crowd went wild, civilians poured into the street. Reporters tripped over themselves to broadcast the feed. National leaders began tweeting within seconds. And from inside a black SUV nearby, Chief Huxley stared out in silence, his phone vibrating non-stop. Sparrow looked to Langston. We made the drop. But Huxley won't go quietly. You know that. Langston nodded. Then we go get him. Inside Langston's war room that evening. The plan was set. Huxley had fled to a private estate 40 miles outside D.C., surrounded by armed mercenaries, helipads, and encrypted panic rooms. A private fortress. No official warrant would reach him before he burned every last trace. Langston stood before the team, now 10 strong, former military, intelligence, and loyal law enforcement. This is no longer a courtroom matter, he said. This is justice in its purest form. We move at dawn. Jax loaded the last of the gear into their transport. You know, if this goes bad, Langston interrupted. If this goes bad, it'll be because we hesitated. And hesitation is how evil survives. Sparrow strapped in beside him. No hesitation tonight. The doors shut, engines roared, the hunt for Chief Calvin Huxley had begun. The sun had barely risen when Langston's team arrived at the outskirts of the estate, a sprawling compound tucked into the wooded hills. The air was thick with fog, the kind of oppressive silence that hung before a storm. It felt like the calm before a cataclysmic collision of past wrongs and unrelenting justice. Inside the transport, Langston checked his watch. We move now. No second chances. Outside, the compound loomed. A fortress designed for one man, Chief Calvin Huxley. The security was military-grade, motion sensors, watchtowers, and enough cameras to track a squirrel's every movement. But Langston wasn't concerned. He had his ace in the hole. Nash turned to Langston. Intel shows Huxley's inside. Surrounded by his personal guard. There's no way we can do this without a firefight. Langston locked eyes with her. Then let's make sure we start it on our terms. The team disembarked, stealthily advancing through the fog. Their movements were synchronized, well practiced. Every step felt like a heartbeat. As they closed in on the compound's perimeter, Jax and Sparrow moved to disable the security systems, while Langston and Nash led the charge for the entrance. A whisper of tension hung in the air. They had one objective: bring Huxley to justice. Alive, if possible. But alive wasn't always a guarantee. Langston's heart pounded in his chest, but his mind was sharp, laser-focused. He wasn't just here for the arrest. This wasn't about a badge. This was about something deeper. It was about dignity, about making sure that a system built on lies wouldn't swallow him whole. Clear, Jax's voice came through the comms. We've hacked the outer grid. No more eyes on us. Langston nodded, leading the way toward the entrance, but just as they approached the front door, a loud crack of gunfire echoed through the morning mist. The first round missed, but the next one didn't. It tore through the wall beside Langston, knocking him off balance. Take cover. Nash shouted, pulling Langston behind the nearest column. The firefight erupted around them as guards stationed inside the compound opened fire. Their bullets slamming into the stone structure, echoing off the courtyard like a thunderstorm, but Langston wasn't going to wait. He turned to Nash. "We make it to the central building. We flush him out." Nash gritted her teeth, nodding. "On your six." With military precision, the team surged forward, ducking behind obstacles and moving in tandem, their fire covering every inch of ground. Langston felt the adrenaline rushing through his veins, but his mind stayed cold. Every move was deliberate. Every shot calculated. They reached the entrance just as the first wave of Huxley's personal guards rushed out from the side doors. Langston's team didn't hesitate. They fought with controlled fury. The clash of metal and bone echoing in the morning air. Gunfire erupted like a chaotic symphony, but Langston was in his element, moving like a shadow. Sparrow, with her sniper rifle, took down 2 guards before they even had time to react. Jax was methodical, neutralizing threats with clean precision. Every agent knew their role, no wasted movements, no unnecessary chatter, but it was Langston who led the charge, pushing through the chaos with a single focus. Huxley. They breached the main door, and inside, it was eerily quiet. The grandeur of the estate's interior was masked by the tension in the air. It wasn't just the weight of the moment, it was something far more dangerous. As they advanced down the hall, a voice crackled through the comms. "This is it. Huxley's in the vault room. We've tracked his signal." Langston's pulse quickened. "Move." They surged forward, reaching the vault door. A massive steel barrier that looked like it could withstand a tank. The team gathered, preparing to breach. Langston exchanged a glance with Nash. This was it, the final moment. Langston kicked the door open with all his force. The vault room revealed itself in a dark, luxurious glow. Huxley stood in the center, his back to them, surrounded by multiple armed guards. "You're too late, Langston." Huxley's voice was sharp, laced with that smug, self-assured arrogance. Langston stepped forward, every inch of him a symbol of unwavering resolve. "You've underestimated the truth. You've underestimated the very thing you tried to erase." Huxley's face twisted into a sneer. "Truth? You think that matters now? It's all about power, Langston. I've been building my empire for years. You think you can stop it?" Langston didn't flinch. "No, Huxley. I think you stopped at the moment you decided to destroy lives to protect your own. You set a system in motion, one built on lies. But I'm here to break it." Before Huxley could react, the guards moved, drawing their weapons. Langston's team was faster, gunfire erupted in the room, but Langston's agents were already 2 steps ahead. Taking down the guards with swift, professional precision. Within seconds, the room was clear. Langston moved toward Huxley, who was now on his knees, his face pale, the smugness gone from his features. Langston grabbed him by the collar, lifting him up. "You thought you could frame me," Langston said, his voice low and cold, "but I'm not the one who's guilty here." Huxley's eyes darted around, panic setting in. "You don't understand. You think I'm the only one pulling the strings? There's bigger forces, Langston. You're playing in a league you can't even begin to understand." Langston smiled, though it wasn't a smile of joy. "I don't need to understand their game. I just need to make sure they know it's over." Langston slammed Huxley into the wall. "This is over. You're done. Your reign ends here." Behind Langston, Nash's voice came through. "Langston, we've got backup en route. This place won't be quiet for long." Langston turned, looking at his team. They were victorious, but the battle wasn't yet won. "You're not going to get away with this, Huxley," Langston said, as he turned to face him once more, and as they dragged Huxley out of the vault, Langston knew this was just the beginning. The world would know the truth. He wouldn't let this moment slip away. The fight for justice had only just begun. Well, there you have it. The fight for justice has been won, but the battle isn't over. Langston and his team have proven that the truth will always find its way to the surface, no matter how hard some people try to bury it. As for Chief Huxley, his empire of lies has come crashing down, and the weight of his actions will follow him for the rest of his life. The system may be broken, but as long as there are those willing to stand up, there's hope for real change. I hope you enjoyed this intense and action-packed ride. What was your favorite part of the story? Let me know in the comments below. I love hearing your thoughts, and don't forget, if you want more incredible stories like this one, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Trust me, you won't want to miss what we have coming up.